Hey everybody, this is Matt Atkinson, and you're watching Forward Gettysburg with Aaron Smith.
Oh, I want to be in the cavalry like my forefathers before. Welcome everyone to a highly anticipated episode of Forward Gettysburg. I am your host, Aaron Smith. Welcome to the channel, welcome to the show. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Today, I've got two special things that I'm going to be doing for the episode. First thing up, I am going to be answering questions from Reddit. I am extremely active on the r/CIVILWAR all in caps, subreddit. So if you guys are not members of that subreddit, I cannot say enough how much you guys should be on that Reddit. Even if you don't get on any other subreddit, check out the r/CIVILWAR subreddit. There's a lot of great conversation that goes on in that forum about the Civil War. Every time I'm there, I learn so much. So please make sure you guys check it out. The second big thing that I have going on today is the 100 subscriber book giveaway. So after I'm done answering some questions from the subreddit, I'm going to give you guys the details, how to enter that contest, show you what the prize is. That's right, prize is. It's not just one book, it's not just two books, but it's 3 books that I'm going to be giving away to celebrate me reaching 100 subscribers and to give back to you guys, the loyal subscribers who have been watching the channel. And those of you who have been with me since the very beginning, I've been going back and looking at some of the older videos, and I can say I've come a long way. That first video, chock full of information, talking about stuff maybe not a lot of people know about, the surrender and capture of York, Pennsylvania, but man, it is rough. Since those early days, I've updated the equipment. I've gone through a couple of microphones until I found one that I kind of like. I'm using a wireless mic now, and it's working out pretty well so far. I've been making a lot of connections in the Gettysburg area. I'm going to give you guys a heads up sometime in the future. I'm not sure exactly when, but I'm going to have probably one of the most well-known people that study and talk about the Battle of Gettysburg. That's right, Matt Atkinson, who so kindly also filmed a little promo with me yesterday at the Visitor Center. Thanks, Matt. We're going to be doing an episode together and collaborating on what is very likely one of his favorite aspects of the Battle of Gettysburg and one of mine as well, and that's going to be Barksdale's Charge. So in the future, make sure you guys are on the lookout for the Barksdale episode. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be our best one yet. So please look out for that. And now I've talked long enough. Let's get into the questions from Reddit. The first question comes from user Newport Pleasure 87. Newport Smooth. How do you think the battle could have played out if Reynolds wasn't killed? Well, that's a great question. Thanks for submitting the question. Before I answer the question, I'll just say a little bit about how I did the Reddit questions. I just posted a question on the subreddit. Hey, what questions do you guys have about the Battle of Gettysburg? I'm going to film a video with it. So a lot of people submitted questions. I probably had about 50 comments on that post and 50 questions. So I picked out 4 or 5 that I think are going to be really good ones to get into. And then I'll probably do some more of these episodes in the future and just kind of keep picking these questions. Some of them are really deep, and I'm going to have to do a lot of research because these are incredibly well thought out questions. The people on this subreddit, they eat, live, and breathe the American Civil War. So they ask some really deep questions that I'm going to have to dig for. So I just wanted to say that. But Newport Pleasure 87 wants to know, how do you think the battle could have played out if John Reynolds wasn't killed? Well, that is a great question. Personally, I feel the Union would have had much stronger leadership throughout the day on day one. Of course, we had John Buford with a delaying action by the cavalry. That's strong leadership. John Reynolds comes onto the field. If you guys have watched the Reynolds episode, you know that Reynolds had a storied career, not only in the Army of the Potomac up to the point of the Battle of Gettysburg, but in the United States military in general. He was an incredibly effective leader, an incredibly effective soldier. And as you see on day one, the Union line, they have some successes on day one, but they also have some failures as well. Some decisions were made that were not great decisions. And I feel that if John Reynolds was there would have been a lot better, higher level decision making at the Battle of Gettysburg on July 1st. I will say this, the what ifs of history, especially the Battle of Gettysburg, where there are so many what ifs, what if this, what if that, etc., etc. They're incredibly fun to think about, but they're also incredibly difficult to think about as well. And for me, it's difficult because at the end of the day, that's not how history happened. History happened the way it happened. And that's much easier to study than to play these what if questions. So with the disclaimer out of the way, I feel Reynolds likely would have made a stronger stand at Seminary Ridge. I think eventually he would have realized that Seminary Ridge was more of the key point of the first day's battlefield for a couple different reasons than where they initially deployed the Union line, which was there along McPherson's Ridge, there in Oak Ridge, leaning up there right to the base of Oak Hill. So I feel like if he had fallen back to Seminary Ridge, one that's definitely more of a higher ground type of area on the first day's battlefield. So they would have been able to probably deploy their artillery a little bit more effectively. They would have been able to, obviously have all the advantages that having the high ground, all those advantages that comes with. I don't feel that the flanking attack from Rhodes' division and eventually Early's division on the Union right flank there on day one, I don't think those would have been as effective as they were. I don't think they would have rolled up the line, as it were, like they did on day one, if Reynolds had made the decision to fall back to Seminary Ridge a little bit sooner. So there's a lot of things. I mean, some people might disagree. Again, when you're playing historical what if, my opinion versus someone else's opinion versus someone who studied the battle for, 40 years, they might have an entirely different, more educated opinion. But nonetheless, what ifs are fun to play. Newport Pleasure, excellent question. Thank you so much. User Oroboro76, who is very, very active in that subreddit. We've had quite a few conversations in the comments about things. He asks, why didn't Lee occupy Culp's Hill? And the second part to his question, he mentions that Lee would have had a decisive victory if he occupied good defensive ground and forced a Union attack. Wow. This is going to be a long answer. I spent a few days researching this, looking through some books, looking online. So I am going to give you my version, and I'm sure, like I said earlier, other people will very likely give you their version as well. So when we look at the topography around Gettysburg, and we look at those all-important roads, those 10 roads that diverge from Gettysburg like spokes on a wagon wheel, it is my opinion that of those hills, Culp's Hill is the most important. Culp's Hill?
What about Cemetery Hill? That's the most important. Little Round Top's the most important.
No. Calm down, my friends. Calm down. I'm of the opinion Culp's Hill is the most important hill for some very good reasons. One, if the Confederates had Culp's Hill, Cemetery Hill would have been an untenable position. They could have launched successful attacks on Cemetery Hill from Culp's Hill. They could have placed cannon up on Culp's Hill. Yes, Culp's Hill was covered in woods, but these armies didn't travel without axes, without ways to take down trees, to clear trees. So I feel that Culp's Hill, if in the Confederate hands, would have been able to be a launching platform for a successful assault on Cemetery Hill. Reason number two why I feel that Culp's Hill was the most important hill at Gettysburg is because whoever controls Culp's Hill controls the Baltimore Pike. The Baltimore Pike, again, in my opinion, is the most important road in Gettysburg for one simple reason. General George Gordon Meade set up his line in a way to cover the Baltimore Pike and the Taneytown Road. Why did he want the Baltimore Pike? Because that's where his supply line was coming from. That's where his route of retreat was. The Baltimore Pike obviously leads to Baltimore, but it also leads to Westminster, Maryland, which, as I've mentioned time and time again in my videos, Westminster, Maryland was an incredibly important railhead for the Union. That was the end of the railroad where they would get all their supplies, where if they had to retreat, they could fall back. Wow, that was scary. There was a whole branch that just fell and hit my roof and fell down. So sorry about that. But as I was saying, if they had to fall back, they could fall back to Westminster, get on the railroad trains, and make their way back to Washington far quicker than the Confederates could march to Washington. And that was Abraham Lincoln's main objective. One of his main objectives is that Abraham Lincoln wanted the Army of the Potomac to pursue Robert E. Lee while also maintaining a defense of Baltimore, Washington, and Harper's Ferry to a lesser extent. The Confederates actually had a plan to occupy Culp's Hill. There were scouts that went out to Culp's Hill and then reported back to Ewell that Culp's Hill was unoccupied. Now, we get into one of the themes of Gettysburg, and that is faulty Confederate intelligence. Culp's Hill was not unoccupied at this time. It was actually occupied by the 7th Indiana Infantry. They were up there on the crest of Upper Culp's Hill. So just like we get into the second day of the battle with Captain Samuel Johnston's ride, and he claims he went to Little Round Top and was totally unoccupied, but many other sources claim that Little Round Top at least had a signal station and Buford's cavalry was in the area as well. We get into the same type of argument with Culp's Hill on day one, where a Confederate scout they were scouting ahead, saw the hill was unoccupied, and reported faulty intelligence back to the commanding officer. So we're going to get back to that a little bit later. Why didn't Lee occupy Culp's Hill? Day one of Gettysburg, and this is something that I think people lose sight of when they look at the gestalt of Gettysburg, the larger picture, if you will, is they forget that day one, up to that point, saw some of the bloodiest fighting in the American Civil War. We're talking about vicious fighting in places like McPherson's Woods, McPherson's Ridge, the railroad cut, all these types of things, all these places that saw a lot of this bloody, vicious fighting. And these men, they've been marching all over the place. They've been marching quite rapidly during this invasion of Pennsylvania. So these men were exhausted at the end of the day. So instead of pushing these men even further and tiring these already exhausted men, part of the reason why Ewell didn't order an attack is because he realized his men were exhausted and he wanted to give them rest and see what July 2nd would bring them. In fact, Edward Allegheny Johnson, he would lament upon arriving at Gettysburg around 7 p.m. that evening on July 1st that, and I quote, "Oh, for the presence of Old Jack for just 1 hour." Of course, Old Jack being Stonewall Jackson, who had fallen at the Battle of Chancellorsville about 2 months earlier. He was lamenting about Ewell's inaction to take Culp's Hill. Another aspect of why didn't they take Culp's Hill has to do with the confusion of orders. The Confederate forces were still under orders at that point to not bring on a general engagement. But Lee also gave the order to Ewell to take that hill if practicable, especially in reference to Cemetery Hill. there's a lot of confusion within the orders of that day. Lee was very used to just giving a general order to his subordinate commanders, especially Stonewall Jackson. He would let Jackson deal with all the minutia and logistics and everything and the tactics and how to achieve that objective. Whereas Ewell, this is his first time in command of a corps. He was used to getting the direct orders from Jackson. We're going to do this, then we're going to do that, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. So Lee just gave him this very vague order, as well as this order to not bring on a general engagement. So there's a lot of confusion in orders as well happening on July 1st for the Confederate side. Another aspect is there was very little intelligence as well for the Confederates. Ewell didn't know what lied to the south of Gettysburg. They know they faced the 1st Corps. They know they faced the 11th Corps. They drove both of those corps back through town, but they also don't know what other elements of the Army of the Potomac lay just south of Gettysburg in wait. So without very solid intelligence, it's hard to make a move. He doesn't want to send his men into a suicide mission, and I certainly don't blame him. They saved the suicide missions for July 3rd in the afternoon. Back to the plan to take Culp's Hill. Like I said, the 7th Indiana had actually been posted there, so Culp's Hill wasn't unoccupied. Johnson's division is going to arrive around 7 p.m. to Gettysburg, and he's going to get the order to take Culp's Hill. However, by the time he gets his men into position, it's now dark. Civil War era tactics, you just can't move men from point A to point B in, a split second. They don't have armored personnel carriers. They don't have, helicopters or airplanes where they can drop their guys off. Obviously, that all goes without saying. So this stuff takes time. So by the time he arrives at Gettysburg, it's now 7 p.m. By the time he gets his troops in position, who knows how late it is at that point, but it's just reported that it's dark. So now we have night fighting. Night fighting is one of the riskiest, costliest things that could ever occur during the Civil War, because they didn't have flashlights. They had lanterns, but how far is a lantern going to light up the forest at nighttime? So they don't know if they're shooting at their own troops. They don't know if they're being fired upon by their own troops, so they might be hesitant to return fire. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong during a night assault. But nonetheless, Johnson had orders to take Culp's Hill, so he's going to send forward a few skirmishers to kind of scope out and scout out the area. These skirmishers, these scouting parties, they're going to come under Union fire. And Johnson's pretty much at this point, nah, dog, we ain't doing this. No way. We'll just see what July 2nd brings. He's going to suspend all the operations until the next day. So that was part 1 of Ouroboros' question. Part 2, would Lee have had a decisive victory if he occupied good defensive ground and forced a Union attack? Now we get into the Lee-Longstreet dynamic, which is something that's been debated quite heavily in the post-battle, post-Civil War academia, if you will. For the longest time, Longstreet was dragged through the mud, insulted, made out to be, all kinds of terrible things by the more pro-Confederate generals who were retired from the Army at that time. Longstreet, he may have brought it upon himself just due to the fact that, he became a Republican. He did a lot of work for the freedmen as well. So he's going to face a lot of backlash in the post-war era. Longstreet's initial plan, or at least what he thought the initial plan was for the invasion of Pennsylvania, was it was going to be strategically offensive. They were invading, but tactically, they wanted to draw the Union into attack. The way things developed at Gettysburg, Lee thought that he could roll up the Union Army corps by corps and surprise attack them and just destroy the Army of the Potomac one corps at a time. And July 1st, he's relatively successful on that front. But come July 2nd, the Army of the Potomac has had time to centralize all of their forces at Gettysburg. And by July 3rd, any hope of winning the battle was clearly out of Lee's hands. So yes, I believe Lee would have had an absolutely decisive victory. When we look at defensive battles, Fredericksburg comes to mind. That's probably the big one that comes to mind for me. During the Battle of Fredericksburg, Lee was outnumbered by quite a bit, 2-1, if not somewhere in that general area. But he was still able to fight off Union assaults at the Battle of Fredericksburg. You know, down there toward Prospect Hill on that battlefield, the Union had some small success there. They were able to punch through the Confederate line, but counterattacks and reinforcements were able to shore up that weak point. So it was proven in the past that yes, Lee could win a defensive battle. But Lee also realized that being outnumbered, defensive battles, fighting defensively, would just whittle away his men. I really believe Lee had his heart and his mind and his goal set on this grand Napoleonic battle, the battle to end all battles, the battle that will bring the Union political figures to the bargaining table, and they could negotiate for the independence of the Confederacy. That, I believe, is what Lee was going for at Gettysburg. We see how that turned out. Ouroboros, thank you so much for great questions. I hope that I answered some of it and explained some things for you. And, I look forward to hearing what you have to say in the subreddit. All right, user Alexander the Ape asked the following question. Have you been to Devil's Den? Is it really haunted? Alexander the Ape, thank you so much for the question. I have been to Devil's Den. In fact, this morning, I just published my Devil's Den episode. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, please do so. Talk a lot about the action, some cool off the beaten path sites that you might not have known about. So make sure you check out Devil's Den. To answer the first part of your question, yes, I have been to Devil's Den. The second part, is it really haunted? Well, I'll tell you this. I am not one to believe in ghosts or spirits or the great, portal between worlds, whatever you want to call it. I will tell you this, and I'll try to find the footage where it was. I'll have to look through the raw footage, but there was a point where I was editing my Devil's Den video, and there was like a low growling weird noise in the background. And at first I thought it was some kind of microphone interference, but it really wasn't. There weren't any helicopters. There weren't any big vehicles driving by at the time necessarily. There might have been like a car or a van driving by, but nothing that would make this weird low growling sound. So I may have to start reevaluating my thoughts on the spirits of Devil's Den. But overall, I'm not a huge believer in that. There's a lot of local legends that talk about Devil's Den. Probably some of the more famous ones. You have the Texan, the man dressed up like a Texan soldier. Whatever a Texan soldier dresses up like, but that's how the legend goes. They claim he's a Texan soldier, and when people get out their cameras, he'll look at them and say, "What you're looking for is over there." And he'll point off to the distance, and the people will look through their camera and then turn around to say thank you, and he's gone. That's a very famous ghost story of Devil's Den. You also have, like I explained in my video, at least locally, we would talk about the P. Noel story, that there is a rock that has a very distinct carving in it that says P, the letter P, and Noel, Noel. Very distinct. You can't miss it. If you're exploring Devil's Den, you can't miss the P. Noel rock. The legend that I was always told, and we were always told as kids growing up in school and everything, was that P. Noel, the P stood for Peggy, and she was a young lady who was riding a carriage nearby, and the carriage and the horse ran off and fell over, and she perished there. And the P. Noel is her spirit coming back and haunting the area, and you know, the spirit put the carving of her name in the rock. Well, P. Noel was it was a stonemason who wanted to leave his mark on the Devil's Den. So that explains that one. And then, of course, you get into the triangular field and just kind of the more general Devil's Den experiences, if you will, where people say that they are trying to take a picture, and you know, all of a sudden their fully charged camera is no longer charged. The battery's been drained. Same thing with cell phones, or they go from having, you know, 5 bars of service down to no bars, and their phone, the phone turns off mysteriously, and all these kind of things. Listen, guys, here's my personal opinion on the whole Ghost of Gettysburg thing. When we look at Gettysburg, the history of tourism, there is an incredible spike in the early and mid 90s. Part of that is due to the Ken Burns documentary. He dedicated an entire episode of his documentary to the Battle of Gettysburg. And also, you had the movie Gettysburg as well come out. So in the early to mid 90s, there was this huge spike in interest about Gettysburg. And of course, whenever the interest peaks, people are going to want to visit the battlefield. And here is Mark Nesbitt and these other, you know, grandfathers of the ghost tour movement. I don't know what you want to call it, but here are all these guys that are like, oh wow, there's a lot of people coming to Gettysburg. They saw green, you know, their eyes lit up like Mr. Krabs looking at money. And so they came out with all these ghost tours and all these different books and ways, you know, to take advantage of the increased tourism to the town. I'm going to end with a phrase: a tourist is easily parted from their money. So that's my opinion on ghosts. Is Devil's Den haunted? I don't know. It's fun to think about. It's entertaining to listen to, but to take it as hard facts, I can't do that. I just can't buy it. Great question, though, Alexander the Ape. Thank you very much. User Turtlework asks, who is to blame for Jeb Stewart's no-show? And I'm going to assume he meant S-T-U-A-R-T. Who's to blame for Jeb Stewart's no-show? What a great question. Probably one of, if not the most debated facets of the Battle of Gettysburg and the Gettysburg campaign is Jeb Stewart's disappearance until July 2nd. So who's to blame for Jeb Stewart's no-show? 3 people: Alfred Pleasanton, David McMurdy Gregg, and John Buford. Let me explain to you guys. The Battle of Brandy Station, Alfred Pleasanton is going to divide the Cavalry Corps into 2 divisions under David McMurdy Gregg and John Buford. They are going to attack and surprise the infallible Jeb Stuart. Sorry, Jeb. They're going to surprise and attack him at the Battle of Brandy Station. And Jeb Stuart, being this very debonair man who is used to having his name in all the newspapers across the country, the man who's ridden around the Army of the Potomac and embarrassed them during the Peninsula Campaign, he has now been embarrassed himself. So Jeb Stuart, with his pride being hurt, will embark on another ride around the Army of the Potomac. He's going to make his way very close to Washington, D.C. He's going to make his way up through that area. And Jeb Stuart is not going to keep in contact with Robert E. Lee like Robert E. Lee not only expected him to, but ordered him to when he went on this ride. Jeb Stuart wants to restore his honor, and he wants to repair his ego. He's going to be delayed and thwarted several times by the Union cavalry. Memorable, very, very fairly well-known places where he's thwarted by the Union cavalry. He's going to be Westminster, Maryland, and he's going to be thwarted by a small detachment of cavalry in an action known as Corbett's Charge, where the Delaware cavalry is going to charge at Jeb Stuart and his cavalry. And Another more famous example on a much larger scale is going to be the Battle of Hanover, where he's going to encounter Judson Kilpatrick's cavalry. And there's going to be a battle in the streets and the farm fields around Hanover, Pennsylvania, which is maybe 10, 12 miles outside of Gettysburg. So there's going to be a significant engagement there at Hanover that happens on June 30th, further delaying him. Jeb Stuart then, knowing that there were reports of Ewell's corps in the Dover, York, and Harrisburg area, he's going to make his way to the north of Hanover, and he's going to go to Dover, and he's going to miss Ewell, and he's going to be told, yeah, Ewell went toward Carlisle, and he's going to go to Carlisle, and he's again going to miss Ewell. So then he's making this very roundabout way to eventually hit Gettysburg on July 2nd. And by the time he reaches Gettysburg on July 2nd, his men have been riding for weeks straight, sleeping in the saddle, and they are totally exhausted. So what can they do? They have these 120 wagons, which Lee very famously tells Stuart, they are no use to me now. They are an impediment. So who's to blame for Stuart's late arrival? No show to the Battle of Gettysburg? Those three Union cavalry commanders, Pleasanton, McMurdy Gregg, and Buford. Great question, Turtlework. Thank you. So those are the questions that I had from Reddit, the questions that I picked. Like I said, I have many, many more questions that I want to get to in a future episode. If I answered all of them, I'd be here for 5 hours straight talking about the Battle of Gettysburg, which isn't a terrible time, but come on, who's going to sit in front of their phone or their TV for 5 hours watching me talk about Gettysburg? What you guys have been waiting for, the 100 subscriber book giveaway. I have these 3 books here that I'm going to be giving away to one lucky special subscriber. Now, how do you enter this giveaway? First, you need to make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Make sure that you like this video and then comment telling me that you're liked, that you're subscribed, and maybe add a question, a suggestion for the channel. Let me know that you're there. Let me know you're enjoying it. Something like that. If you've done all that in, let's say 2 weeks, I will go through the comments, pick my favorite comment, and we'll get in contact with you. I will reply with my email address. Get in contact with me. We'll arrange a way for you to get these books, and I'll congratulate you. I'll send you some, not only these books, but maybe some awesome Forward Gettysburg business cards so you can share with your friends, and I'll probably even put in a handwritten, heartfelt note just for you, my fine subscriber. So, what are you guys winning today? Well, we have the Civil War Collection, Artifacts and Memorabilia from the War Between the States, featuring items from the National Archives and the Museum of the Confederacy. Wow. This is quite a collection, about a $20 value. Not only that, but I've also added in this 1861 Confederate Soldiers Prayer Book. And then we have the Secret Missions of the Civil War by Philip Van Doren Stern, first-hand accounts by men and women who risk their lives in the underground activities for the North and the South. So this is going to be also included in the package for the winner. And then finally, to round it all out, we have from the American Battlefield Trust, Battle Maps of the Civil War, the Eastern Theater. Awesome little book. I love battle maps. You should love battle maps too. This covers most of the major engagements of the Eastern Theater. So this is a great companion to have with you as you travel all along the Eastern Seaboard, visiting Civil War historic sites and battlefields. So, Battle Maps of the Civil War, Eastern Theater. So, the gauntlet is set. Make sure you like the video, you've subscribed to the channel, and you comment on this video, letting me know that you have done both. And, let me know you're here. Let me know what you think about the channel. Let me know your opinion on some of the questions that we discussed today. Let me know what your favorite video is. Let me know, what your least favorite video is. But I wanted to do this. I've been teasing it for quite a while. So this is the official kickoff of the giveaway. So, this is something I wanted to give back to the Forward Gettysburg community. and give back to you guys as a thank you for your support here at Forward Gettysburg. I also guess there should be a disclaimer. Obviously, only one person's going to win this. So before people think that if they comment and like and subscribe, everyone's getting all these things. It's just for one person, but it's going to be a very lucky person, and hopefully it makes their Christmas a little bit better. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on Forward Gettysburg here. I'm so ecstatic that I've reached 100 subscribers. I hope to reach 1,000 and then 10,000 and then, God, wouldn't it be cool to get the silver YouTube plaque of 100,000 subscribers? Maybe that's just a pipe dream, but I still think it would be really awesome. As always, I'm your host, Aaron Smith. I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas, wonderful holiday season, and I will catch you on the next one.